What's up, everyone? My name is Ian Cummings. Welcome to the Pro Football Network YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the best quarterback prospects of all time in the NFL draft. Now, dealing with the NFL draft and an all-time list at the same time, that is a perfect storm of subjectivity. So I'm not going to put any restrictions on it. If you have a prospect that wasn't mentioned that you think deserves consideration, feel free to put them in the comments. But this is my list of the top 10 as it stands. At number 10, I got Cam Newton, Auburn quarterback from the 2011 cycle. I had a few names in mind for that 10th spot, but to me, Cam Newton really harkened in a new era of quarterbacks when you think about the physical tools that he possessed. 6'5", 248 pounds. The dude was a tank in open field, won the Heisman that final year, won the national championship, and ultimately earned that #1 overall pick. He ran for over 1,400 yards and 20 touchdowns, but he also passed for 30 touchdowns and only threw 7 picks. Looking at that efficiency as a passer in that early stage of his development, combined with his elite running ability, that trucking ability, the physicality in space, and the athleticism, he had the full package of tools, and that's why he went #1. That's why he ended up winning MVP down the line. Unfortunately, he never won a Super Bowl, but the resume speaks for itself. Cam Newton was about as talented as they come. At number 9, I've got Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals in the 2020 NFL Draft. Now, I haven't been watching football for as long as some of you, right? Some of these guys on this list I wasn't even born for, so my list may be a little biased toward recent quarterbacks, but Joe Burrow was phenomenal. There weren't a ton of holes to poke in his profile. Obviously, he was kind of a late bloomer coming from Ohio State, transferring to LSU, but that final season, few quarterbacks have ever matched that level of efficiency in a college football season. He passed for 60 touchdowns to just 6 interceptions, won the national championship, was an incredibly dominant passer, didn't have an elite arm, and that was one of the big knocks at him. But when you think about what constitutes it at the quarterback position, that it factor, Joe Burrow had a lot of those tools and he embodied a lot of those traits, especially in the pocket, evading pressure. You think about playing Madden, having that third person view of the quarterback. Joe Burrow had that built in his brain, man. He was a guy who could always sense pressure on the backside. He had elite evasion skills. He can always extend plays, keep his eyes downfield, and that creation capacity at his size with his level of intangibles, that's something that's already led him to becoming a very successful quarterback at the NFL level. He's already made a Super Bowl, made another AFC championship after that, and the hope is that he can one day get a ring to really bolster his effects. At number 8, we got Justin Fields from Ohio State in the 2021 NFL draft cycle. He's not the only 2021 quarterback on this list. He is the second one of the two, but I had him graded very highly and very close to that QB1 mantle in that class. With Justin Fields, obviously the elite running ability is something that stands out. 6'4", around 230, right? So the dude is a tank in open field. Again, very well built. He ran a 4.44 40-yard dash. So that speed in open field, that ability to evade, but also extend the field when you get that open space. He is a dynamic running talent. We saw that this past year when he crossed the 1,000-yard mark. But on top of that, too, he actually showed a lot of promise as a passer in college. He definitely needed to adjust coming from that Ohio State offense that had a lot of option reads on the boundary. But you can see the anticipation. You can see the situational accuracy and touch down the field, the high-level arm talent. This is a guy who has all the tools, and he's slowly growing toward his ceiling in the NFL. And coming out, man, I mean, there weren't a ton of holes to poke in that physical profile, right? He still needed to adjust to the NFL as a passer. But as we've seen him done that, man, the talent has really taken over. At number 7, we got Robert Griffin III from Baylor in the 2012 NFL draft class. Robert Griffin III, man, if Andrew Luck wasn't in that same class, he would have gone #1 overall. I mean, that's kind of the gist of the argument there. But he was one of the best talents of that time when you think about, winning the Heisman. But again, a very dynamic runner. And Justin Fields and Cam Newton, these guys are strong. They're big bodied, right? But no one quite has the agility, the electric running ability that RG3 had at his size, right? That was a unique trait to him alone. He had a laser arm to go along with it too, very easily generated velocity in the short and intermediate ranges, could push it deep as well. He ended up winning Rookie of the Year that first year with Washington, and you can make an argument that he would have had a much more successful career if a knee injury hadn't unfortunately derailed him early on. So Robert Griffin III, number 7 on the list. Number 6, a guy who potentially set in motion the transition to more mobile quarterbacks earlier on. 1984, the supplemental draft. Steve Young was originally drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, eventually found his way to San Francisco, where he would succeed Joe Montana and become a Hall of Famer in his own right. Steve Young, coming out of BYU, he was a good passer. He was that lefty with a laser. We all know it. But at the same time, that creation capacity that he provided, this past cycle, Bryce Young was a prospect who was lauded for those same traits. And that's something that Steve Young showed, right? He wasn't an elite running threat like a Justin Fields or a Cam Newton who had the size and the play strength to go along with the mobility, but he was an incredibly evasive passer who could sense pressure, sidestep and keep himself on his feet and then create opportunities outside the pocket and downfield. That kind of trait really buoyed his career in the NFL and really made him one of the more dynamic, one of the more transcendent passers of his time, and I think brought in a new era of football at the quarterback position. At number 5, got Trevor Lawrence from the 2021 NFL draft class. This was my QB 1A to Justin Fields at 1B. Trevor Lawrence, man, I mean, there's in this top 5 in particular, right? These are guys who you look at them, they have the physical tools as well, but off the field is where they're even more impressive, right? Trevor Lawrence was really praised for, he came out and as a true freshman became one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football right away. Off the field too, a very calm, composed leader, and we've seen that in the NFL as well. There were times when he got down that whole first year under Urban Meyer, that first half of the playoffs in 2022, but he never got out, right? This is a guy who can rebound. He's very resilient, but then at 6'6", 220, he moves like a gazelle as an athlete. He's got a very, very good arm with arm elasticity and velocity. He can layer it into tight windows. He can push it down the field. He's got situational precision, right? Trevor Lawrence was a guy who checked the boxes on the field and off the field. And that's what you'll see with some of these top guys, is that they really check the boxes. They're full composite profiles, very hard to find holes in their game. Number 4, I've got Aaron Rodgers, and this is an interesting one because he wasn't the first quarterback off the board in his own class. 2005, it was a big topic of discussion back then, but Alex Smith from Utah was the guy who ended up going number 1. Some people thought that Rodgers might end up being in that consideration, but he ended up falling all the way to the 20s where the Green Bay Packers took him. The rest is history, right? But I think Rodgers, looking back, was the guy who was the more well-rounded, the more upside as a quarterback prospect. When you look at his profile, he had the size, right? But Rodgers in particular is one quarterback who's really brought along this new age of, not the creation capacity, right, but the arm talent, the arm elasticity, the ability to adjust your throwing angles off platform, maintain velocity, something that we've seen with Patrick Mahomes, right? Aaron Rodgers was really the first iteration of that. And at California too, he was a winner. He led that Cal program to unfathomed success, right? At the same time, he was a very efficient, productive signal caller in college. And then on top of that, having the high-end tools, really the only reason he dropped is because of that cocky exterior, rubbed some evaluators the wrong way, but the Packers ended up reaping the benefits. And, he's still in the NFL now, transitioning to the Jets, hoping that he can win another Super Bowl ring with them. At number 3, we got Peyton Manning. This is where you really get into the elite of the elite at the prospect level. Peyton Manning in the 1998 NFL draft went number 1 overall. Ryan Leaf went number 2. Obviously, we've all heard of that dichotomy. Ryan Leaf was not as successful nearly as Peyton Manning. Both were phenomenal prospects coming out, but Peyton Manning was a step above. And this is a guy who in 1997 with the Tennessee Volunteers passed for almost 4,000 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. That was still kind of the tail end of the pre-2000s era of football, where you weren't accustomed to seeing that level of production from a passer, right? It wasn't really, we're still kind of in the ground and pound, the run first mode. So seeing a passer like Peyton Manning, that prototypical frame, but at the same time, such a high level of intelligence, instincts, field vision, football IQ, and then the arm talent to drive it into tight windows too. This is a guy who off the field with his leadership, his lead by example mentality, and then on the field as well, just willing to, and being able to stay in command and in control of the game at every level. Peyton Manning really embodied that. And he was one of those quarterbacks who set that in motion. One of the quarterbacks where, these top 3 in particular, everyone knew coming out, yeah, this guy's probably going to be a good quarterback, right? With a lot of these prospects every year, you hear, yes, he checks a lot of boxes, but we don't know what's going to happen. But with these top 3 guys, a lot of people were in consensus, like, we know he's going to be a good quarterback. We just don't know who it's going to be for. But Peyton Manning, number 3, the prototypical mold, but checked all the boxes from the mental state. Number 2, John Elway, the Denver Broncos, went in that 1983 class, historic, with Jim Kelly and Dan Marino. John Elway went to the Denver Broncos, of course, and he ended up having a Hall of Fame career, was a Super Bowl champion, right? John Elway, he was one of those guys who, looking back, everyone talked about him being the next big thing. It was in the papers, right? This is the guy that you don't want to miss out on. He had all the tools, right? He had the high level arm talent. You'll look at throws. Even now, his velocity really matches up with some of the top passers in the NFL today. He could drive it down the field. He could push it into tight windows. He had that high level velocity in his arm, but at the same time too, the gunslinger mentality, the unshakable, unflappable confidence that you want in your franchise QB. He had that too. He was athletic enough to create, he had all of those tools. And on top of that too, the mental fortitude to stay in the game, to provide value and kind of convert in clutch situations and deliver, right? John Elway had all of that. And as we saw, it really came to fruition with the Denver Broncos. At number 1, I got Andrew Luck from Stanford, the number 1 overall pick in the 2012 NFL draft. Andrew Luck was this generation's iteration of John Elway, as a prospect at least. Unfortunately, injuries ended his career sooner than expected, but Andrew Luck literally checked all the boxes, to the point where if you read a scouting report on him and the weaknesses section would start out with, "We're sorry, we just don't have much on this guy when it comes to weaknesses." I mean, 6'4", around the 230s range. He ran a 4.67 40-yard dash. I think he tested with a 9.79 relative athletic score. So at that size, he had the athleticism, he had the arm talent to a high degree. But even after that, all of the things that coaches and evaluators raved about were the intangibles. This is a guy who is, he's the first one in, he's the last one out. He's a phenomenal leader off the field, quiet and mild mannered, but also can speak up when he needs to and kind of deliver and direct the team. He's got very good intelligence, very good field vision on the field, the toughness and the evasion ability in the pocket, the poise to make plays when he needs to. Andrew Luck really checked every box, and it's unfortunate the injuries ended his career when they did, because we might have been talking about him in a much greater light. Even now, he deserves to, right? In the short time that he was in the NFL, he was immediately one of the top passers, one of the most productive passers. But had he stayed healthy, we might have been talking about a Hall of Fame talent. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that in the long term. But as a prospect, when you talk about checking the boxes, right? Andrew Luck, I think, did that more than most. So that's my list of top 10 prospects in NFL draft history. Obviously, it is a completely subjective exercise. There are other guys that do deserve mentioning. If you have any guys in mind, let me know in the comment section below. And let's see if we get any new iterations in the 2024 NFL draft. We know we've got Caleb Williams of USC, Drake May of North Carolina. Already very high expectations for both, being one of the best prospects of all time. That's a high bar to clear. We'll see if they hit it. In the meantime, I'm Ian Cummings for Pro Football Network. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.